Everybody. Ian Nicholas back here. Season 2, Episode 2 of the Beyond the Whistle podcast. Thank you so much for joining us once again. You're joining a little bit of a newer crew today. We have some new guys on. Obviously, Dylan Pescator's in college, and Austin Platt has his wisdom teeth out, so he is on the IR. So I have two new guys with me today, Mack Seelert and Brendan Tiscornia. So let's learn a little bit more about the guys. Mack, what's a fun fact about you?
I say a fun fact about me is I'm a football junkie, Ian. I love the game as much as anyone else would, and I just have a true passion for it.
And he's one of the New Canaan Rams' finest wide receivers in the land. You're going to hear that name a lot in the future from NCTV's football live streams. Brendan, what's your fun fact?
Well, I like long walks on the beach and romantic movies.
Yeah, New Canaan has plenty of beaches for you to go to. Anyway, let's stop talking about all that nonsense and start talking about what you guys hopefully tuned in for, the NFL and the NBA talk. That's how we're going to kick off this episode of Beyond the Whistle. And we're going to start with the big games in Week 11 of the NFL. Let's start with that Thursday night game that happened almost a week ago, guys. Seattle versus the Cardinals. I'm going to start with you, Mack. Russell Wilson. Not a big game for him, but he did enough to win this game. What have you seen over the last few weeks from him? But more importantly, how do you think he played and is going to be the rest of this season?
Well, leading up to this game, he has been in the race for the MVP, and I feel that the last 2 weeks he has kind of slowed down a little bit, and he's kind of stepped his foot off the gas. But this game, he came out, he balled out, and I thought he showed true potential that he could bring this team to the playoffs and, be real contenders.
And Kyler Murray, Brendan, he had a bit of a rough game, but I saw in your notes that, you said you said Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson equal future of NFL. I know you're a big college football guy, so I'm going to ask, do you think that these are the kind of players we're going to see coming out of the college ranks more and more often? Those Kyler Murrays, those Russell Wilsons, what make them so special?
Well, I'll be honest, Ian, coming into this year, I didn't think Kyler Murray would be this good. I saw, shades of Baker Mayfield, like maybe he's a little overrated because Oklahoma's been just a quarterback factory, and he only played 1 year there. And to be quite frank, the defenses you play in the Big 12 are not nearly the same as what you're going to see in the NFL. But he has absolutely shattered my expectations. He's been one of the most impressive quarterbacks all year and an MVP candidate.
Most definitely. DeAndre Hopkins is certainly helping him out a lot. Cliff Kingsbury's proven he can make the transition to the NFL. But we'll see. My big takeaways from the game, Seattle ran the ball really well, and that's what they do best. Really, that's what they did best last year. They don't have Chris Carson. He's out with an injury. So they relied on Carlos Hyde and Russell Wilson, and they ran for over 160 yards on the ground. That's the way Seattle wants to play. They don't want to throw out Russell Wilson's arm and throw 50, 60 times a game. They want to run the ball, and they want to set up the pass after the run. So I think they got to do more of that. And if Chris Carson gets back this week for them, that's going to be huge. And, just a really great game. Kyler Murray got a little bit banged up. But my big takeaway is even though Seattle won, Mack, I'm going to ask you this question. Seattle needs to tighten up that defense for the rest of the season. Do you think they can continue to play this well against high-level opponents with only really Bobby Wagner and Jamal Adams as their top players on the defense?
They have two all-pro stars on their team. I think they just haven't clicked yet. They need to get, the mechanics down in order to, put together, a solid working defense. Because this season so far they've been a little shaky. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, they definitely have been shaky, but Carlos Dunlap is a guy they acquired via trade. He got 2 sacks in one of his first games as a Seahawk, and that was against the Cardinals. So maybe he's one of the building blocks to make this defense.
He's been the perfect fill for Jadeveon Clowney missing. He's more of a technician guy, as Jadeveon Clowney is more of a big power guy who's just going to try to barrel you over. But I think Carlos Dunlap's the perfect fit for the Seahawks defense.
Yeah, big guy, star at Florida back in the day, getting it done in the NFL. He has been for a long time. So the final score of that Thursday game, 28 Seattle, 21 Arizona. Seattle, a 1-game lead in the NFC West. They're 7-3. Arizona, 6-4. Let's go to that game that happened on Sunday. It was a crazy overtime thriller between the Titans and the Ravens. Final score 30-24 in the Titans' favor. They're now 7-3 on the year. And Baltimore, guys, they have been slumping. They're 6-4, and they've lost some really big games recently to Pittsburgh and now Tennessee. Brendan, Lamar Jackson is not looking like that same guy that he was last year.
No, I know it firsthand. I drafted him in fantasy.
I know.
Lamar this year has a quarterback rating of 62.3, which is mediocre to say the best.
Mm-hmm.
Completion percentage of 63.4%, which is near the bottom of the league, and 193 yards per game, which is nowhere near MVP numbers. And the thing is, defenses are figuring out his strongest point of his game, which is running the football, and he's going to have to rely more on his arm if they're going to win games in Baltimore.
Yeah, but he does have a good arm. But those weapons, Mac, they're really not getting it done down there in Baltimore. There's not a lot outside. And, you play for New Canaan. They like to run the ball on the offensive side of the ball. Baltimore likes to run the ball. But you need those wideouts to make plays to set up that run game. And he can't get it done when Marquise Brown has no yards. And Dez Bryant, who's all of a sudden back in the league, is your second leading receiver. So they need some help, right?
Personally picking up Dez Bryant, I don't think it does much for the team.
Mm-hmm.
He's a veteran, and I think it's good to have a veteran leader around to, coach up these young guys. But if you don't have another star or even, upcoming star other than Marquise Brown, who's a decently short guy too. He's 5'10", 5'9".
He looks small.
Right. You got to have some, big time receivers because that's where the game's coming to now. You see guys like DK Metcalf running around and teams are saying, I should have taken that guy in the draft because you can turn those guys into stars. It's there, The Ravens just need one of those.
Well, speaking of stars who are similar to DK Metcalf, A.J. Brown has been fantastic for this Titans team. And all of a sudden, Corey Davis is starting to live up to those expectations coming out of Western Michigan. He's having a really solid year. Now, what is it? How hard is it for a defense to defend two receivers who are that big and that fast?
Honestly, it's very stressful for the defensive side because you also have Derrick Henry, a monster of a man, who's they're almost feeding the ball to every play. And then when they run that, play action, you have to worry about, a guy like A.J. Brown, who it takes two people to bring down.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think the key to stopping that is you can't give up the short game against receivers like that because, once the ball is in their hands, it's dangerous.
Yep, you saw it on A.J. Brown touchdown late, Brendan. He just broke 4 tackles, got it into the end zone off that quick route. He is one of the most physical freaks in this league. But let's not forget about the guy who threw him the ball, Ryan Tannehill. A lot of people were bashing him when they gave him that big money, Brendan, but he's been exactly what the Titans have needed at the quarterback position, which is stability.
Yeah, he's taken a huge jump from last year, and he's over the age of 30, and this is completely unexpected. He was a mediocre quarterback in Baltimore. He's a top 10 quarterback this year in Tennessee. Maybe it was something to do with getting rid of Adam Gase.
Maybe so. Mac, you're a Jets fan, so you can tell us about the genius of Adam Gase. Maybe that's a story for another time. But, hey, getting out of Miami, it's helped Ryan Tannehill so far. So we already told you about the records and the final score from that game. Derrick Henry with the game-winning 28-yard touchdown in overtime. But I'm more interested about J.K. Dobbins. I think he's in an excellent situation in Baltimore over the years. I don't know necessarily if he's the most talented back out there, but they love to run the football. They have a solid line, and Mark Ingram isn't going to be there forever. So I think he's going to be a phenomenal player for them. He has COVID right now, so does Ingram. But when he gets back, I think he's going to take the reins of this running back group for the rest of the season and for the future. I think he could be a potential All-Pro. I don't know if he's that good, but the volume is there for him to succeed in Baltimore. I'm very excited to see what he can do in the years to come. Hopefully Baltimore will be able to turn around this season at just 6-4.
Yeah.
Matt, go.
Yeah, you saw it straight out of college too. He was an NFL runner. Mm-hmm. I believe he set the all-time rushing yard record in yards in a season for J.K. Dobbins at Ohio State. I believe it was, but you've seen it from the start with him. He's an elite running back. He was playing at an NFL level in college, and now he's here as a rookie. And I think as time progresses, he's going to be a star, like you said.
And Brendan, I know you're a big college fan. I mean, he's averaging 5.3 yards per carry. Did you think J.K. Dobbins was a great pick from Baltimore in the second round out of Ohio State this year?
I mean, last year, I think it was because he was playing on such a dominant offense, equipped with Justin Fields, Christo Olave, and another good running back in Master Teague, that he was able to slip through the cracks to Baltimore. I think he's just as talented. He's a first-round talent back.
Yeah, they got a steal on him, and next year I think is going to be a big year for him, and hopefully more of a bounce-back year for Baltimore if they can get more weapons around Lamar Jackson. So speaking of those overtime games, Indianapolis with a great 34-31 win over the Green Bay Packers, 34-31 win. Hot Rod, Rodrigo Blankenship with the game-winning field goal in overtime. Both teams are now 7-3. So this was a really crazy game. You know, Mack, the Packers had a 14-point lead at one point, and all of a sudden it vanished. But Colts don't play a very sexy style of football, but they win games behind Phillip Rivers. Tell me about what you like about this Colts team.
I mean, first of all, I just want to start off by saying, I mean, look at the Packers. You know, their defense has been a problem for them, you know, these past couple of years. And, you know, it's been holding them back from winning playoff games and, you know, being contenders. And the Colts this year picking up Phillip Rivers. Personally, I've never been a fan of Phillip Rivers. You know, I don't like the way he throws the ball. And, you know, he's a slinger. You know, he'll throw INTs, but he'll throw touchdowns, you know. But I think he's fit perfectly in this Colts offense. And they have weapons. And what's his name? Is it Ninka Hines?
Nyheim
Hines, excuse me.
No problem.
They have weapons like Nyheim Hines that, you know, they can elaborate on to create more offense. And, you know, the Colts defense has been much better than I expected this year. So, you know, they're battling for that. I believe they're the 1 seed in the AFC South right now.
Yep, they are. I believe they do have that tiebreaker. Phillip Rivers, he's been really great as of late. Didn't have a good start to the year, 4 touchdowns and a pick. But him and head coach Frank Reich, they've just been neck and neck, head to head. They've been figuring it out together, and it's finally working. One of the guys, Brendan, that you might know a little bit more about than us because you're the big college guy is former USC wideout Michael Pittman. This guy's big and fast. He was a top of the second-round pick this year, and he's all of a sudden come on for them as of late. What did you think of Michael Pittman coming out of USC, and how do you think that big-bodied receiver is finally starting to break out into his number one role in Indianapolis?
Well, there are just so many talented wide receivers coming out of the draft this year, and they have been productive in the NFL. You look at Chase Claypool, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, and now Michael Pittman.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that he was worse than these guys. There was just so much talent at the top of the draft, which is why he fell.
Yeah, just a phenomenal player, 66 yards and a touchdown in this game, and Indianapolis just keeps getting it done. You know, they say defense doesn't win championships, but this defense is a great one. Yeah, they gave up 31 points to Aaron Rodgers, but they made the stops when they needed to, and all in all, they got the win. So there you have it. We're not done just yet, though, because we're going to take a quick little break from our faces, and we're going to send it over to a much more cheerier face. Perrin Tamasco is going to tell us how the Sunday night football game went between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Las Vegas Raiders. Perrin?
Thanks, Ian. Yes, Sunday night was a highly anticipated rematch for the now 9-1 Chiefs. Back in Week 5, Kansas City fell flat and let the Las Vegas Raiders grab an upset win, 40-32. So this time around, KC was looking to avoid losing the season series to their bitter AFC West rival. The Chiefs' win keeps the Raiders at number 2 in the division and keeps the Chiefs at the number 2 spot in the AFC, behind the only unbeaten Steelers. A key component to this win was, no surprise, MVP favorite Patrick Mahomes. He completed 34 out of 45 pass attempts to earn 348 yards last Sunday. He threw 2 touchdowns and only threw his only second interception of the season. With a minute 15 left on the game clock, Mahomes scored a touchdown in 7 plays. He completed a 10-yard throw, 9 yards, then to 16 yards, 15 yards, and 3 yards. And then finally, to win the game, tight end Travis Kelce caught a 22-yard touchdown. Kelce finished with 127 yards, and wide receiver Tyreek Hill was right behind him with 102. But we can't forget about one of the league's rising stars, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He had 2 rushing touchdowns and a couple of receptions that kept me watching the game from the edge of my seat. Derek Carr led his team with 275 passing yards, with topping off his 25,000 career passing yards on his first drive last Sunday. He threw one more touchdown than Mahomes, making it 3, and tying Mahomes in throwing one interception. Now, throwing things over to tight end Darren Waller, who had 88 yards total with one touchdown. He is a little weapon that the Raiders like to have in the back of their pocket, and he can be a little open target in the end zone when you need him. So now the Chiefs did have some difficulties stopping the Raiders' offense once again this time, and luckily Mahomes bailed his team out once again. Carr might have had some crazy audibles on that night, but he didn't have a chance to win the game after Mahomes sealed the deal. Now the Chiefs have won a franchise record 8 straight road games and have a commanding 3-game lead in the AFC West. This team continues to break boundaries. The Raiders give them a run for their money once again, but they wouldn't let the pesky silver and black beat them twice in one season.
Thanks, Perrin, and I know as a Chiefs fan that was a very exciting game, and, well, Kansas City came out with the win, obviously. Next, Monday Night Football, another phenomenal game between the Rams, who've kind of fallen under the radar this season and have been very good, and the Buccaneers, who, well, when you get Tom Brady, the expectations are on the moon. But they were not on the moon. They were underground. I don't know where I'm going with this. They lost the game. That is what I'm trying to say. Final score 27-24. The Rams won on Monday, and they're now 7-3 in the NFC West, right up there with Seattle. Buccaneers now 7-4. Brendan, 27 points isn't a ton, but the Rams, they just love to chew up that time of possession and get it to their wide receivers in Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. They just find ways to get those guys open. What makes the Rams offense so good under Sean McVay?
Well, it's just I feel like a big part of it is that the weapons that they have. Mm-hmm. You got Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, but you also have to keep an eye out for 2 different running backs, Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown. And you have to keep an eye out for Tyler Higbee, who's turning into one of the NFL's better tight ends.
Yep, you got Gerald Everett, too, and the 3-headed monster in the backfield of Cam Akers, as you mentioned, Henderson and Malcolm Brown. Those guys, running back by committee might not help fantasy football owners, but it does help the stats. They are able to run the ball extremely well. And one offense that wasn't humming was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tom Brady, Mac, he's not looked good in the last few games. He's thrown, I believe, 5 touchdowns to 5 picks in the last 3 outings. He threw another 2 picks in this one. He just did not look very good, did he?
I believe that anybody would say that, it's the end of his career. Of course he's not, playing his A game. But, personally, I think, he's been put out of this, genius New England offensive system. He played under Bill Belichick, the legendary Bill Belichick. And, I don't think that he's, the elite quarterback that he has been all these years.
Mm-hmm.
As he's been taken out of the system. He's thrown in the Bucs offense. They gave him a ton of weapons. They're trying to, keep him alive. And, I think the weapons he has, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Ronald Jones just stepped up this year. I just think that those guys are keeping him alive. And, but, it's not really helping the Bucs.
Well, he was very solid to start off the season. He was putting up great numbers. He's been a little bit down recently, Mac, but it doesn't help when you're playing one of the best defense in the league in the Los Angeles Rams. Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey, these guys are just holding down the fort. But this defense from top to bottom is excellent, isn't it?
Right. The Ram – first of all, they've always had up front Aaron Donald, the beast, man. He's clogging everything up, putting quarterbacks under pressure, all by himself. He's taking 2 guys away from someone else on the D line. And this Rams secondary has always been legit. They've had incredible corners and safeties, throughout all time. And adding Jalen Ramsey to their squad is a huge bonus, because you could cancel somebody out of the game just like that, with a lockdown corner like Jalen.
Yeah, there are a lot more players on this defense who are fantastic too. Michael Brockers, Leonard Floyd, who they brought over from Chicago this offseason, John Johnson, and then you mentioned Fuller, who had the game-sealing interception on Brady, the former 199th pick, had 2 picks on the game, picking off number 199, Tom Brady himself, the former 6th rounder. from New England. And I know as a Jets fan, you're happy to see Brady fail. So
Love
I know
it.
you couldn't be happier. I think the Rams are legit. I really do. They were rough to start the year, but, remember, I think one of their best games was their biggest loss against the Buffalo Bills. They were able to hang it with any team in this league, the Bills, the Seahawks, the 49ers. Well, they're not great anymore, but the point is the Rams are legit. Sean McVay is a phenomenal coach. We all know that. He got his team to the promised land just 2 years ago. Jared Goff is good enough. People like to hate on him. He is good enough. There's a reason why he was a former number 1 overall pick in this draft, in this NFL. He can sling it. And when you got guys like Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, like Brendan said, makes your life a heck of a lot easier. They've just found a groove on that offensive end. And
Oh, sorry.
no, keep going. Keep going.
I was going to say that adding Cooper Kupp to this, West Coast offense is just perfect for it. Because, you got a guy who's quicker than almost anybody on the field on an inside route. And, to be able to bang the ball out to him quickly and then just have him run, it's going to bring this offense alive. It's all, that's the one thing they're waiting to click. And they're a legit team.
Yeah, 64 catches for Kupp on the year, 11 catches in 2 of the last 3 games. He has been in takeover mode recently and is certainly benefiting this Rams offense. For Tampa Bay, I think Brady will bounce back. He always finds a way to. This offense is too good. Bruce Arians is too good an offensive mind, but I don't like what Arians is doing with his offense. Brady should not be taking that many deep shots. He's too old to be throwing a ball that far down the field. He does his best work in the short and intermediate game. When you have weapons like Antonio Brown and Chris Godwin and a guy like Rob Gronkowski who can get it done in those areas of the field, Arians has to find a way, and offensive coordinator Byron Leftwich, they have to find a way to get Brady easier looks because he can get it done. He knows where to put the ball, but he can't air it out like he used to. He has not been great throwing the ball deep over the last few games. I need to see Tampa Bay beat a good team with a good coach. They couldn't beat New Orleans. They can't beat the Rams. They need to prove they can win that big game. They have not been able to do that this year. Let's go to the quick hits, which, we do on our Rams Sports Report, but we're bringing it to Beyond the Whistle as well. Brendan, Taysom Hill looked phenomenal against the Atlanta Falcons, and for fantasy owners, he played tight end, and he got the job done for them there too. Did you think Taysom Hill was going to be this good, and how did you think he actually did?
No, I thought for sure that Jameis Winston would start the game in New Orleans because he has had his problems, but he's a tried and true NFL starter, Heisman winner at Florida State. Taysom Hill had thrown less career passes than Jake Luton going into this game.
Oh, God. Yeah.
But he ended up pulling out the win, which was very surprising for me.
Yep, ran for 2 touchdowns in this one. Jameis Winston led the league in passing yards last year, second in passing touchdowns, and now he's a backup to a former skilled player and special teamer. But Taysom Hill is winning that job right now down there in New Orleans. New Orleans with a big 24-9 win over the Falcons with Drew Brees on injured reserve, and Taysom Hill is taking over. Maybe he's the future down there in the bio. I'm going to go down to you here, Mac. Joe Burrow. The whole NFL world was stunned to see him go down with a torn ACL and MCL in this game. Also some additional damage to cartilage in that left knee in the 20-9 loss to the Washington football team. He's a young guy. He's going to bounce back from this injury most likely, but this really blows, doesn't it, for Cincinnati?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying, it's going to affect their, their run at the playoffs or whatever, because I don't think they were really going to fight for the playoffs anyway. But, it kind of takes the soul out of a team when, your best player, and he shows he's a true leader on the field. He's a winner. He wants to win. And, that's exactly why I think he's going to, bounce back, just like that. He could be back. He's going to be back next year. And, I have no doubt that he's just going to keep getting better and better and bring this team to a higher level.
He is a cocky and confident guy, but he's a fighter. Went to Ohio State, didn't win the job there, went to LSU, had one of the greatest seasons a quarterback has ever had in college football history. He's uber talented. He's got great weapons around him in Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon. And hopefully the Bengals give him enough time that he needs. This kind of reminds me of the Carson Wentz injury. Not saying Joe Burrow is going to turn into Carson Wentz because recently he hasn't looked good. But, Joe Burrow might need some time next year, might miss the first few games of the year. And, Cincinnati's season is pretty much down the hole. Hey, at least my Giants are probably going to get a win this week against the Cincinnati Bengals, who are starting Brandon Allen. Lastly, speaking of NFC East teams, Dallas got a huge 31-28 win over the Minnesota Vikings. And Ezekiel Elliott, Brendan, he looked good, over 100 yards rushing. Andy Dalton did just enough to get this win, tossing 3 touchdown passes, beating the 4-6 Vikings 31-28. What did you think of this game? But more importantly, how did you feel that this game is going to affect the rest of the season for the Cowboys? Are they back in some sense?
No, the Cowboys are not back. They still have a chance at division because God only knows how, but they are in second place right now. And I think it was a really big deal for them to get Andy Dalton back, guy who has played well in the NFL, who's made a couple Pro Bowls. Who do you have starting before that? Ben DiNucci? Garrett Gilbert?
Yeah, some great players.
Even if Andy Dalton isn't on the top of his game, it's much better to have a familiar face out there if you're a Cowboys fan.
Yeah, one big storyline for this game was they moved Zach Martin, the star right guard, out to right tackle. And a lot of people are citing that as a reason for Ezekiel Elliott having his bounce-back game because the whole line kind of came together behind Martin in that one. It's going to be interesting to see what Dallas does the rest of the year. Obviously, I hope that the Giants make the playoffs. Any team from the NFC East that makes the playoffs should not. We all know that, but one team will, as you mentioned, Brendan. And it's going to be interesting because Dallas is definitely the most talented team in the NFC East when you got guys like CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, and Ezekiel Elliott. But that defense still can't really get a stop to save their lives. And can you really trust the Red Rifle to get it done?
All right. Like what I said, Joe Burrow getting injured, it takes the life out of the team. The second I heard Dak Prescott went down and was out for the season, I immediately went on my fantasy app and I traded all 3 of my Cowboys players away because that's just, I know. And it was the right move because, look, I mean, these guys, they're not playing with the right mindset. You lose a guy, it's next man up. That's the slogan at New Canaan High School. It's always next man up. And whenever, someone goes down, you got to be ready. And, it's tough when you lose a star like Dak Prescott. And it leaves a lot of pressure for other people to produce.
Well, Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, they have been getting it done with the quarterbacks that have been there. So they haven't been as good as they were with Dak Prescott, obviously. But those guys are very talented, and Andy Dalton used to be a Pro Bowl quarterback in this league. He's still in the middle of his prime, technically, given his age for the quarterback position. So it'll be very interesting to see how Dallas comes together under first-year head coach Mike McCarthy for the rest of this season. Speaking of the Dallas Cowboys, tomorrow they play on Thanksgiving. I'm just going to ask you this, guys, one really quick, brief question. McCarthy versus Ron Rivera, Washington versus Dallas, 2 bad teams on Thanksgiving, so a lot of people are going to be watching this game. Brendan, who do you think is going to win this game? Dallas, which, they have a little bit of momentum, or Washington, who also has a little bit of momentum following that win against Cincinnati? Who would you take?
Well, I had the unfortunate experience of watching the first game between these two. It was the most boring blowout I have ever seen in my life. And this was with Andy Dalton on the field. The football team just shut down the Cowboys. They couldn't get anything going. They could barely get a first down. I don't expect it to be that bad this time, but I still expect the Washington football team to come out on top.
Mack, who you got?
I'm going to have to go with the Washington football team as well. I believe Dallas is starting to click a little better. And, I don't know if you saw CeeDee Lamb's miraculous catch last week.
Oh, we saw it.
But, they're going to make their playmakers make plays. But I think Washington is more put together right now than Dallas, and that's why they're going to win.
Just so that we don't all get memed by all picking Washington, because I know this is definitely going to get national media attention, the Beyond the Whistle show. I'm going to pick Dallas. Dallas is the more talented team. And Washington, just when you think they have a good win, they show you just how bad this roster is. Outside of Terry McLaurin and a really solid front seven, this Washington team stinks. And I like Alex Smith, phenomenal story. He's still got a little bit of juice left in the tank. But Andy Dalton, another week under his belt in this Dallas team. Zeke looking like his old self again. Tony Pollard can add a little juice in that wide receiver trio outside for Dallas. Doesn't matter how bad their defense is. Washington can't really score. Your defense doesn't really matter when you can't really put up points. So I'm going to take Dallas to win this game and be the number one team in the NFC East heading into the weekend. And lastly, we got Detroit-Houston. This game might not be too much, Brendan, but hey, this might be a competitive game between two teams that really don't have a lot to play for.
Yeah, these have been maybe the two most confusing teams I have watched all year. Because one week, Detroit can put up 30 points behind Matthew Stafford and Kenny Golladay. Last week, they had shut out by Carolina. Houston can take Tennessee to overtime, and they can also lose and score 7 points against the Browns. So it's really a mixed bag with these two teams. You never know what you're going to see, and hopefully we get something interesting on Thanksgiving.
You just saw it, 20-0 loss to the Carolina Panthers. How do you explain that? You really can't to the Detroit Lions. And Kenny Golladay might be back, maybe. DeAndre Swift might be back, so that's good news for Detroit. And, from the Deshaun Watson perspective, Mac, it really stinks when you don't have DeAndre Hopkins there, does it? But Houston, they're just playing the long game at this point. Not a lot to play for with the Colts and Titans ahead of them in the AFC West. But do you think Deshaun Watson can at least prove to some people toward the end of this year, following that New England game, a big win for them, that he's still the guy there and that he can still overcome a weak supporting cast around him?
After seeing Deshaun Watson's performance last week, I think the Houston Texans are going to handily take this game. He can just completely take over a game. You see quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes and, Aaron Rodgers, they get in the zone. I saw that in Deshaun Watson last week. And, if they can get open for him, remotely open, just like a slightly open, Deshaun Watson's going to get it there for them. I think that's gonna bring them the win against the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, he's been fantastic this year. Box score doesn't say everything, but a 69% completion rate, a 25 touchdown to interception ratio, over a 108 passer rating. That doesn't even include what he can do with his legs. He's a fantastic player, and hopefully guys like Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks will be there next year and can continue to develop a chemistry with him in a full offseason, hopefully, and they can get him some more help on that offensive line that he desperately needs, and of course on that defense, which can't really get many stops. So that is, speaking of stopping, we're going to stop talking about the NFL. We're going to start talking about the NBA draft, which happened in the middle of last week. And we saw the Minnesota Timberwolves take the big guard out of Georgia, Anthony Edwards, with the first pick. But Brendan, you're a big college hoops guy, and you think someone else should have been the number one overall pick, or at least if you were picking, you would have picked this guy number one overall, James Wiseman.
I would have taken James Wiseman first overall. I understand why the Timberwolves didn't. They have Karl-Anthony Towns on the roster, but I do believe James Wiseman is a more talented player overall. He's just as good of a shooter as Edwards, but he's also 7'1", can jump, can run. And in his first collegiate game at Memphis last year, he had 28 points, 16 rebounds, and 3 blocks.
Yeah, he's a special talent. Maybe doesn't fit the mold of a modern NBA big man. He's been compared to Hassan Whiteside and DeAndre Jordan, two fantastic players in their prime, but not shooters, not guys who can really space the floor. But he's got the length to make those plays in the paint, a rim roller, and he was a very highly touted player coming out of high school as well. He only played 3 games last year with the Memphis Tigers before NCAA violations had him sit out the rest of the season. I think Anthony Edwards is a great pick for Minnesota. In a draft that wasn't really top-heavy in talent, he's a guard who can create his own shot, drive to the rim, draw fouls, and he isn't going to have to jack up all those terrible shots that he took down there with the Georgia Bulldogs, because when you have D'Angelo Russell and Karl-Anthony Towns ahead of you, you're not going to get that opportunity from head coach Ryan Saunders. He's going to put him in check. But Edwards, 6'5", 220-pound kid, averaged 19 per game last year. He's going to be solid. And I think that he's drawing comparisons to James Harden, Dwayne Wade, Donovan Mitchell. I don't know if he's going to be that good ever, especially playing behind 2 great guys in Minnesota. But as a third piece for this future, once again, this team's future looks so bright. But in the West, I just don't know if they can really make anything happen. Speaking of guys with bright futures, Mack, we all know the story and the lore of LaMelo Ball, and he heads to Michael Jordan's team with the Charlotte Hornets. They finally add a superstar player to that team. Tell us a little bit about LaMelo Ball and what you think he'll do in the NBA.
No, I've watched LaMelo Ball, all throughout high school and, even some of his basketball overseas. And, he has an incredible vision for the game. His passing game is, off the charts incredible. And, it's his brother's an incredible passer too. And, I would say he's an even better passer than his brother. But, he lacks a good quick step and a good pull-up jumper. And I think that's going to hurt his game and affect his passing ability in the NBA, because it moves at a faster, higher level. So, I think it was the right pick for the Hornets, but I also think it's not the best pick. I think that they could have gotten someone that's more guaranteed to be productive for their team than a Ball brother.
Well, who knows? The big baller brand heads down to Charlotte. Maybe not the same clout that those Jordan sneakers might have, but regardless, he's a big 6'6" guard, Brendan, who can pass. And whenever you have a lead guard with that kind of size, it automatically puts defenses in a bind, right? I mean, we've seen it. Magic Johnson, Oscar Robertson. These big guys usually have pretty good track records.
He can put defenses in a bind, but when he's out on the court, he's putting his own defense in a bind. He's a little too nonchalant on defense, if you ask me. Hasn't been the most stout defensive player in Australia, Lithuania, or high school. And it's a big jump in talent from the Australian league to the NBA. I don't know if he's going to be able to keep up with NBA athletes.
It will be interesting to see if he ever turns on the motor on the defensive end, because he's certainly got all the tools to be an all-star player. Drawing comparisons to both Jalen Rose, maybe his ceiling and his floor, maybe more like a Sean Livingston. We'll see how he pans out in the NBA, though. It's going to be exciting to see what the Hornets do this year, because we know they're not going to win much, but they have a lot of young players that are certainly interesting. Speaking of young,
Oh, sorry.
No.
I would say, the one thing Ball does have over most larger point guards, Ben Simmons is finally starting to develop a shot, 6'10" body, he could post up a center. But a guy like LaMelo Ball, Livingston never really had a three-pointer after his knee injury. Simmons, like I just said, is still, not there with his jump shot. Only plus I'd say with LaMelo Ball is he can shoot the ball pretty well from three-point range. And, like Brendan said, he is a little lackadaisical on the court. And that just, that's probably not going to fly in the NBA. But, I think if he made some tweaks and adjustments, that he could be a legit star.
Well, a guy who didn't need to make a lot of tweaks and adjustments last year was Obi Toppin, the guy who might save New York basketball. Who knows? But regardless, we are all very excited to see what the former Dayton Flyer and National Player of the Year last year at the college level can do. Now, Toppin was the 8th pick in the draft. Edwards, Wiseman, and Ball went 1, 2, and 3. We're going to skip to pick 8 because he's the hometown kid from Brooklyn, and we are all excited, Brendan, to see what Obi Toppin can do with the New York Knicks. What did you think of his selection from the Knickerbockers?
I was surprised that he fell to number 8. I think it's the best selection you could have made. He's the highest floor in this draft. He's 21 years old, but you know what you're going to get. Dayton was arguably the best team in the country last year under his leadership. Kansas finished number 1 in the AP poll, but Dayton took Kansas to overtime in the Maui tournament last year, and who knows what would have happened if they played again. Kansas has been a big-time program for a long time. Dayton was all Obi Toppin, and I'm very excited to see what he can do with the Knicks.
So you're telling me that even though a lot of people think that this is not great for the Knicks front court, that you would have taken Obi Toppin over, say, a Tyrese Halliburton from Iowa State. You would still make that selection with him on the board, which he was?
Yes, I would have made that decision. Tyrese Halliburton, he's an excellent player, but you don't exactly know what you're going to get. He was playing at Iowa State, who wasn't the best team last year. I think they only won like 9 games. Dayton won 31. So you know that Obi Toppin, he's a high flyer, a good shooter, a good defender. See how much he can improve in the NBA, and that's going to be how much. That's going to determine how great of a player he will be.
He's got a high floor, might not be the best fit for the Knicks, but one thing you can't really scout, Mac, is winning. You've won a lot of games. In New York, they have not won a lot of games recently. Over the last decade, they've been really the laughingstock of the NBA, and hopefully Obi Toppin, alongside R.J. Barrett and Mitchell Robinson, can finally turn this team around under Tom Thibodeau's leadership. What did you think of the Toppin pick, in your opinion, and do you think that the Knicks are going to be a better team in the future because of it?
You know, I mean, I've been sitting in Madison Square Garden since, I was a kid going to watch the Knicks. And one thing New York loves is an electrifying player. And, Obi Toppin, yeah, I think he just fits perfect with New York. He's from New York, that just makes people love him more.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's a legit NBA ready player. And I think it was the perfect fit for the Knicks. And, but I think nothing's going to happen if they don't build around him and to help him out. It's like any team, no one can win a team by themselves, except maybe LeBron. But still, it's impossible to make a run at the playoffs if you don't have people surrounding your star.
Yep, most definitely. And he's going to get a lot more support in New York, hopefully, than he did with the Dayton Flyers. He averaged 20 points, 7.5 rebounds, 1.2 blocks per game last year. Proved he could shoot that 3-ball. Defense needs some work, but he's got all the intangibles to be a solid player at the 4 or maybe even the small ball 5. He's a big lob threat. And as you mentioned, Mac, when he's catching those alley-oops and hitting those threes in the Mecca, it doesn't really matter if you're winning or losing ball games at that point in year one. The 23-year-old rookie is going to excite some people in those very pricey seats. So let's see how it goes. Phenomenal NBA draft. A lot of big names coming off the board there in those 60 picks. A phenomenal week of NFL football. Have a safe Thanksgiving, everyone. Brendan Tiscornia, Mack Seelert, Ian Nicholas here. Season 2, Episode 2 of the Beyond the Whistle show. And we'll see you next time.